The other day, I posted a reply to a young man who is not from the US who left a series of comments basically saying that he doesn't think that Americans are resisting this fascist regime because he has not seen armed militias in the streets. He's not seen a violent armed resistance against the government. So therefore, we aren't doing anything. So I proceeded to explain to him all of the ways that millions of people around the country are working to restore our democracy. And just because it doesn't look like his particular brand of violent revolutionary fantasy, because it's not as sexy as his fatal live action role play, that doesn't mean that resistance isn't happening. And that we know, both from our own history here in the US and from other countries around the world that have successfully toppled authoritarian regimes and instituted or reinstituted democratic systems of government, that nonviolent resistance, a commitment to nonviolent discipline, is more than twice as effective as violent resistance. And that while what we see in works of fiction, in movies, may seem more glorious, it may seem sexier, it's not actually more effective. That's not actually how it works in the real world. And it's ludicrous to think that American citizens forming armed militias are going to stand up against our highly militarized police force and the U.S. military. Now, we could talk about whether or not the U.S. military would cooperate with the regime, but then we should really talk about the ways that active resistance, nonviolent resistance, includes getting the pillars of support, like the military, like the cops, to engage in non-cooperation, to get them to peel off from the regime, to get them to no longer uphold the dictator in charge. It is by yanking the pillars of support, getting the people who are currently holding Trump up to no longer cooperate with him, to no longer give him their obedience. That is how we stop fascism. Not as sexy as shootouts in the street. But guess what? Then we don't have people dying under the tank treads, and we actually get to win. We absolutely need and are building a massive resistance of tens of millions of people. And we employ a diversity of nonviolent techniques. When we engage in activities like sustained economic blackouts, protests in the streets, that is not in any way something that organizers of those events think are going to get Trump to just step down. The goal of practices like that is to get the pillars of support, to get the institutions and people that are currently propping Trump up because they think that they will survive better if they go ahead and appease or capitulate, to get those folks to withdraw their support, to show the institutions like colleges, law firms, the media, cops, the military, universities, corporations, to show all of them, actually, millions and millions of people do not want this. Public pressure against those pillars of support to get them to withdraw their support, to begin to engage in non-cooperation instead of obedience. That is how you topple authoritarian regimes. When we're working toward things like a general strike, that is not to directly do something to Trump. That is to get the pillars of support to say, we cannot continue to prop up this loser. All of the people are against him. The economic and social pressure, electoral pressure, becomes overwhelming. And Republicans in Congress and businesses and universities and even the police and the military say it is no longer in my best interest, or my conscience no longer permits me to continue to support the Trump regime. That is the goal there. And also, let me say here, people that work within those pillars of support, you may currently be part of the military. You may be working for a university that is appeasing Trump, that is cooperating with him, that is a collaborator with fascism. You may be a government employee doing your best to resist from within. How can those folks from within those institutions begin to erode support? There's public pressure from the outside, and then there are people resisting from inside these institutions that are currently upholding the regime, starting to work to engage in non-cooperation and to get other people to engage in non-cooperation to turn the tide. And I really appreciated this comment. Most of my favorite anti-Yahtzee resistance stories were stories no one knew about until after it was all over. That's exactly right. It is regular, everyday people that are doing what are relatively small acts of resistance. Small acts of non-cooperation in your ordinary life within the context of your work. Those are the things that are not going to make the headlines. Those are the things that are not part of that, dramatic, fictional narrative. But it is all of those little things we are doing to push back. It is all of the small ways that we are refusing to cooperate. We are refusing to be appeasers that are eroding and undermining the regime. It's that extravagant, opulent beach house that some rich dude built on a sandy overlook. And then maybe there's like a king tide or there's a storm and the water comes in extra high and each wave laps against that sandy cliff a little bit more and a little bit more, and they start to knock down a few grains of sand and a few more and a few more. No one wave is going to undercut the foundation of that house and watch it tumble into the surf. But it is the relentless hitting over and over and over again of non-cooperation that starts to slowly erode, gets those grains of sand to trickle away, to be drawn away into the surf, until that rich motherfucker's ridiculous house slides off the cliff and into the ocean. That's what we're doing here. Every small act of resistance matters, and it adds up across millions of people engaging in intentional acts of non-cooperation every single day, engaging in outreach every day, putting on the economic and political pressure every day. That is what is going to be successful. It won't be speedy. It won't be sexy. It will not make for a good action movie, but that is the strategy that will work. Nonviolent resistance must be strategic and organized, and it must be engaged in consistently by millions of people. And that is what we are building. That is what we are doing right now. Ordinary people are already doing all kinds of things that you're never going to hear about, but they contribute meaningfully. They contribute meaningfully. They are purposeful and they are effective at eroding this regime, eroding support for this regime. We are working to topple those pillars. We are boycotting corporations and we are letting them know, as long as you support Trump, you're not getting another penny of our money. We are calling our electeds. We are showing up to their town halls and saying, if you don't stand up against the unconstitutional things that this regime, the violation of our rights that Donald Trump and this regime are committing, we are going to vote you out in the midterms. You need to fear your constituents because we have more power than Trump does when we work together. And guess what? We're working together. You need to write your alma mater and say, you need to sign on to the coalition of colleges and universities that are standing up against Trump. Do not be a Columbia, or you will never see another dollar from my family again. And then you need to contact all your fellow alums and tell them that they need to write in. You need to let everybody know the post-Trump era is coming, and we will remember who was an appeaser and who had courage and who stood up for the rule of law and for the American people. We need to let our electeds, we need to let corporations, we need to let institutions know our memory is long. We will not forget how you behaved now at this moment in history. What are the ways we can pressure those pillars to not cooperate? And what are the ways, if we are within one of those pillars, that we can engage in non-cooperation? Everybody has something that they can contribute. I really encourage you to join your local Indivisible group, to check out Congresswoman Jayapal's Resistance Labs, to go to mobilize.us and see what kinds of pro-democracy events, trainings, activities, protests you can get involved in. Every small contribution matters. We need to keep building momentum. We need to keep the pressure on. And we need to be committed to small acts every day that actually do add up and will get the job done.